For most of us, our foray into Eastern culture started with a kung fu movie we watched when we were kids. Some of us were glued to the screen when Bruce Lee took out a pair of nunchucks wearing his yellow jumpsuit. For others, we watched Jean-Claude Van Damme perform the death touch or dim mak on stage to prove he was trained by the Shidoshi clan. And yes, even Japanese karate was influenced by Chinese Shaolin kung fu. It's no wonder that when we grew up and the UFC started, we were all glued to the screen, hoping to see some Eastern martial arts master come and tear everyone apart, being able to dodge punches with ease and strike an opponent down with some explosive video game finishing move. The problem is, that never happened. Something strange called Bullshido emerged. And worse than that, a bunch of fake masters parading around as legitimate lineage masters started being challenged. And the UFC trained guys easily exposed these frauds. This has led to an all-out rejection of traditional martial arts, with people firmly believing that when it comes to a real fight, mixed martial arts is what's real and truly works. But is that true? Is that really true? I'm gonna break all of this down for you and show you once and for all who would win in a fight, a UFC mixed martial artist at the top of his game or a traditional martial arts master of old. Because the truth is, the answer is more mysterious than you ever could have imagined. Everyone loves Bruce Lee, and he was sort of the first real Hollywood martial arts guy that made it into everyone's home across the world. And it's true, listening to Bruce Lee talk about Kung Fu or his philosophy on life, there seemed to be something more to him than just being an average guy.
You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
What if I told you this was the tip of the massive Kung Fu iceberg? Bruce Lee primarily trained in a type of Kung Fu called Wing Chun. Wing Chun was developed from Shaolin Kung Fu and was created and honed originally for a woman to be able to defend herself against an overwhelmingly powerful male opponent. So if Wing Chun came from Shaolin Kung Fu, what are its mysterious origins? And why do we barely see anyone from the Shaolin Temple fighting in the UFC? The history of it all is going to blow your mind. Shaolin Kung Fu is probably the principal martial art in China. It's a Kung Fu style which almost all hard styles of Kung Fu have at least some connection to. It was developed over 1,500 years, and it's interconnected with Buddhism, believe it or not. Now, Buddhism spread to China during the 400 plus years of the Han Dynasty and beyond, with many Indian monks making the long journey there to pass down scriptures and teachings. Eventually, in 495 BC, Emperor Shaowen of the Northern Wei dynasty created a temple called Shaolin, or Little Forest in Chinese. The first Shaolin temple was constructed. A few decades later, a mysterious monk named Bodhidharma, or Damme in Chinese, crossed into China from India. And this is when everything was about to change for Kung Fu. Allow me to explain a little here because it goes far beyond the realm of kicks and punches. When Bodhidharma, or Damme, arrived in China to a few temples that were on the way to the famous Shaolin temple, he was pretty disgusted with what he saw. The monks he came across were full of all kinds of intentions and attachments, which were kind of a taboo in Buddhism. It's literally what you try to get rid of. Bodhidharma saw that these monks didn't seem to grasp what making true spiritual advancements meant, at least to him. As they busied themselves building temples, discussing theories, and translating scriptures, Bodhidharma did what he could to help them enlighten to true progress. He said nothing, did nothing, and just meditated. One time, as Bodhidharma was traveling, he was invited to give a lecture at a monastery. The crowd stood there restlessly as they waited for him to talk, but all they got was a monk on stage sitting in complete stillness. I mean, pretty annoying if you think about it. Who was this guy who thought he knew better? But Bodhidharma wasn't like everyone else, as you'll soon come to see. As you can imagine, not everyone agreed with Bodhidharma's ways. One day, a former Chinese general turned Buddhist monk named Shen Guang gave a lecture. Bodhidharma was in the crowd. He would either nod his head in agreement or shake his head in complete disapproval at what Shen Guang was saying, which really started getting on Shen Guang's nerves. But Shen Guang was from the hood, so he took off his thick Buddhist prayer beads and chucked them at Bodhidharma's head, knocking out 2 of his teeth. To his great surprise, Bodhidharma simply smiled toothlessly and began to walk away. Sensing that there was more to this monk than met the eye, Shen Guang decided to skulk around and follow him wherever he went, until Bodhidharma would take him on as a disciple. It was to the Shaolin temple that Bodhidharma was headed, and this is where it gets kinda crazy. Bodhidharma needed to make it across China's largest waterway, the Yangtze River. Well, Shen Guang was creeping closely behind and watched Bodhidharma searching the ground. Amazingly, Bodhidharma picked up a stalk of reed, placed it on the river, and surfed across to the other side, weightlessly. In disbelief, Shen Guang tried the same thing, but began to sink right away. Bodhidharma knew that Shen Guang was following him wherever he went, but he refused to take him on as a disciple. When he finally arrived at the Shaolin temple, Bodhidharma found a comfy cave nearby and proceeded to meditate for 9 full years. No food, no water, just meditation. Shen Guang stood by waiting. When Bodhidharma finally finished meditating 9 years later, he moved into the Shaolin temple and sat to meditate again for another 4 years.
你個漢語好差，我一個字聽唔到，而且好刺耳。
It was during these 4 years that Shen Guang just couldn't take it anymore. He burst into the room, chucked a snowball where Bodhidharma was meditating, and demanded to be taken on as a disciple. Bodhidharma serenely replied, "Not until red snow falls from the sky." Shen Guang was unwaveringly determined to be taken on as a disciple. He grabbed his sword, stuck out his left arm, and cleaved it clean off. Then he bent down, picked up the amputated arm, and like any badass would, he lopped it into the air. The blood turned to ice as it snowed down around them, and that's how Shen Guang finally transitioned from creepy follower guy to actual badass, the one-armed disciple of Bodhidharma. Now, Bodhidharma eventually did get up from meditating, and when he did, he changed Kung Fu forever with his one-armed friend.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Well, what's that then?
Bodhidharma noticed how weak the Buddhist monks' bodies were in the temple. I mean, they hadn't even meditated like he had for 13 years straight. Why were they so out of shape? So he taught them exercises called the 18 Luohan hands. Luohan means arhat in Chinese, and an arhat is basically a spiritually cultivated invincible body, or a sage. I mean, I freaking want to learn the 18 Luohan hands. After passing down these exercises, Bodhidharma wrote and left to the monks 2 books. One was called the Shi Sui Jing, or the Classic of Bone Marrow Cleansing, and the other was the Yi Jin Jing, which was the Classic of Sinew, or Tendon Metamorphosis. Sadly, these books were lost to history. The 18 Luohan hands were developed into the 18 Luohan fist. These kung fu movements were used for centuries to protect the temple from bandits and wild animals. That's right, these monks were beating down bears in the wild. And if you need any more validation of Bodhidharma being a completely badass transcendent being, it's not even known whether he died at all. According to legend, he passed away at 150 years old and was buried. But later, an official named Song Yun was dispatched to India. And as he was traveling there on the Pamir Mountains on a high pass, he bumped into a barefoot monk holding one shoe. Song Yun asked him where he was going, and the monk replied back home to India. When Song Yun eventually came back to China, he told the story of meeting who he thought was Bodhidharma on a high mountain pass. The monks, of course, thought it was ridiculous. I mean, Bodhidharma was already dead and buried, but they dug up the coffin anyway. When they opened it, all that was there was one shoe. So we've got a monk who can make prophecies, meditate for 9 years straight in front of a wall, ride weightlessly on a stalk of reed to cross a river, pass down secret kung fu exercises and manuals, and now transform objects like a shoe into a fake dead version of himself to appear like he's dead. Honestly, if all of this is true, I'd like to see one of those UFC guys attempt any of this. And this isn't even the craziest story, because there are 2 other martial arts styles that nobody really knows about that we have to talk about. Because where there's ancient traditional kung fu, there's also amazing stories and immortals. Another officially recognized form of Chinese martial arts is called Bagua Zhang. Bagua Zhang can be characterized as having a unique set of circular twisting and turning movements, and yet its origins remain an enigma. The story goes that in the Forbidden City in Beijing, Prince Su was having one of his Project X ragers. It was so crowded, it was impossible for the servants to even move around. Then people noticed one middle-aged servant dude twisting and winding around guests at lightning-fast speeds, all while holding trays and plates and cups and not even spilling a single drop of tea. His name was Dong Hai-Chen, and his previously secret martial art form was finally being revealed to the public. Dong Hai-Chen was born in Hebei province either in 1797 or 1813. Yeah, his birth date is a bit of a mystery. In his youth, Dong Hai-Chen learned the martial arts styles that were popular in his village and spent his time training with his cousin, Shan Zhou. Now, at this time in China, there were rebellions going on, and his cousin Shan Zhou participated in one of these. After failing, the cousin returned home and went into hiding. Some scholars say that our hero Dong Hai-Chen had an incredible sense of justice. And seeing his cousin's situation, he left home in his teens and embarked on a journey to learn martial arts. Now, there are all kind of unverifiable and rather spectacular stories about Dong Hai-Chen that say he remained hidden and lost in history for such a long time because he fell in with some rebels, and was even sent on a secret mission to assassinate the Manchu emperor. There are a lot of reasons why that story seems like a stretch, but we'll get into that in a moment. The point is, there was a period of about 40 years where Dong Hai-Chen was supposed to have learned in his wanderings the essence of Bagua Zhang martial arts from a Taoist master in the mountains. If you want to know what a Taoist master is, imagine an extremely powerful Obi-Wan Kenobi living in seclusion, who then starts to impart his arts to Luke when the time is just right. What's strange is that no one knows the identity of this Taoist master, but especially when you cross-analyze it with the name of the martial art form, it becomes even more mysterious. Bagua Zhang martial arts is rooted in the I-Ching and the Taoist theory of Bagua, or the 8 trigrams. The Bagua symbols and the I-Ching were left over from prehistory, which we owe to the credit of Qin Shi Huang for preserving during his reign as the first emperor of China. I can tell you, whatever these things are, they're otherworldly. Even the theory behind modern-day computers came from this thing. You know all those zeros and ones they use for code? This was inspired by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the inventor of binary code, who stared for long enough at the I-Ching and believed he enlightened to the truths behind the 8 trigrams. Bagua Zhang martial arts literally means Bagua palm, or the 8 trigrams palm. This is because you don't hit people with a closed fist with Bagua Zhang. Now that we have a background in Bagua Zhang, back to our fearless founder of it, Dong Hai-Chen. In 40 years of Dong Hai-Chen wandering around, he met someone deep in the mountains. Some legends say it was a master called Coiling Cloud Taoist who lived in Coiling Cloud Cave. Some legends also refer to someone named Bi Chengxia. And some of Dong Hai-Chen's own disciples gave completely different and amazing stories about how their master learned Bagua Zhang, which means that Dong Hai-Chen was intentionally cryptic, not allowing anyone to know its true origins. If this isn't some Master Yoda stuff, I don't know what is.
No, there is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today.
Historians have scrambled to understand how this art form of Bagua Zhang was created. Some think Dong Hai-Chen learned it from a rebel group while traveling, or dreamed it up himself. But think about it, this martial art form had never been seen before, and if these Taoist masters were anything like Bodhidharma, there's a whole can of worms we're opening here. This is what's so unique about ancient Chinese culture. The true culture, not the socio-political stuff that's there now. In the past, it was well known that there were masters or immortals living on famous mountains or in deep seclusion who would not casually reveal their secrets. And you're probably wondering, well, what do you mean by immortal? This is what's so interesting. We're not talking about a pretend idealistic concept where someone gets that title after being cool enough to get a badge. We're talking about it being widely accepted that there were men who had cultivated themselves internally to the point where they were no longer confined by the principles of physics. Dong Hai-Chen, having created such an advanced system all on his own, seems so unlikely that learning it from a secluded Taoist master who eats and breathes martial arts and endured generations or even millennia of refinement before passing it down in secret makes way more sense. So you're wondering what this form of martial arts could actually do then, right? Well, let's get into it. After Prince Su's Rager, where he was moving around like lightning, word quickly spread to all the martial arts masters in the country, and one by one, they came to challenge Dong Hai-Chen. It was said that Dong's ability to get behind his opponent in the blink of an eye was unbelievable. So unbelievable, in fact, that these martial arts masters begged Dong Hai-Chen to become his disciple after failing miserably to defeat him in matches. Dong did have students, and his art form was passed down through his disciples who created the Yin style, Cheng style, and Liang style forms of Bagua Zhang, which was taught to them individually. But Dong was just a man touched by some of these Taoist masters. Surely, at least one master or immortal had come to the public and created their own style, right? He'd be named something like Freaking Awesome Taoist or Firefoot Huge Bicep Taoist, right? Well, hold on to your hats, because we're about to get into the most confused and contentious form of martial arts around, Taichi boxing. Most people think Tai Chi is for grannies in parks who need to keep moving to keep their blood from freezing in their bodies and to have consistent bowel movements. But when you see those grannies move, what you're looking at is an art form that was changed so much it's not recognizable from its original form, because Tai Chi in its original form was called Taichi Chuan, or Tai Chi Fist, and its other worldly movements aren't just for beauty. To understand this, we need to go back about 1,000 years and get into the mind of its founder, Zhang Sanfeng, and to the holiest of holies for all martial arts, the Wutang Mountains. Oh, you thought that the Wutang clan just made that up? Nope, they were referencing the martial arts Mecca. So how do you know this Zhang Sanfeng is legit? You might find it curious to know there's been a hardcore effort to erase him, his deeds, and his miracles off the face of the earth. His story is so unbelievable, it's been easier to pretend it just never happened. We're talking about a man who transformed and influenced all of China's culture and Kung Fu more than anyone else. And in true Taoist fashion, by all accounts, Zhang Sanfeng was a phantom. He was not easily found, but would pop up when least expected and would reward people for their good deeds. Zhang Sanfeng's entire life from an early age revolved around martial arts. He was born with the name Zhang Junbao. Some records show that at the age of 5, he lost his eyesight, so his parents took him to a Taoist priest. And as his eyesight was healed, the priest decided to take him on as a disciple, passing on to him the essence of martial arts and other art forms. Then moving on to Shaolin martial arts, Zhang Sanfeng became an expert in the white crane and snake styles of Kung Fu, as well as the Chinese straight sword. What does any of this mean? I have no clue, but it sounds freaking awesome. At a certain point, he put down his worldly name and took 2 words out from the 8 trigrams, naming himself Sanfeng, which means 3 peaks. There's Bagua being mentioned again. What is this thing? At every turn, Zhang Sanfeng avoided taking any official state government jobs, which he didn't prefer, and instead went the path of martial arts and leading a solemn life. He would live in abandoned temples, because that's what badass martial arts drifters do. And it wasn't until he was at the ripe age of 61 that his life was just beginning. He wandered onto the right mountain, met an immortal called Dragonfire, who was getting on in his years, because, he was an immortal. And he saw this young fellow and said, hey, let me transfer my fully spectacular Dragonfire knowledge regarding inner alchemy to him. This guy can do something with it. And Zhang Sanfeng did. By the way, there's no record of Zhang's official death because he actually prophesied the day he was going to die, which seemed to happen. They put him in a casket and were about to bury him before realizing there were noises coming from inside. They opened it up, he leapt out like a jackrabbit, ran back to Wutang Mountain, and spent the next 140 years developing this thing called Grand Supreme Fist. If you think I'm just telling a funny story or that at the time Chinese years were shorter or something, no. This is all documented. It's just that some people have a really hard time believing it. Remember how I told you it was easier to erase this guy than to accept that he walked the earth and did all of these amazing things? He would have had to have lived in the Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties if the recorded dates in history about Zhang Sanfeng were accurate. Being an ageless master who wasn't dying, was kicking it regularly with Taoist masters with names like Dragonfire, and was learning cool stuff, Zhang started to realize that there was a flaw with most of the martial arts forms out there. They required too much physical strength to get the job done. Zhang Sanfeng took what he'd learned about the internal cultivation of Qi and Gong, these are types of energy, and crossed the knowledge with everything he knew about the physical martial arts. How did this happen? For Zhang Sanfeng, observing nature was his jam. One day, he happened upon a bird with a snake who were fighting. When the bird attacked, the snake coiled and moved away, neutralizing the advances of the bird. When the snake went to bite and strike, the bird easily turned, circled, and brushed the snake away with his wings, rendering the fight pointless. The snake and the bird had better things to do, so they left one another as equals. And this was no ordinary event. That night, Zhang was visited in his dream by the Great Jade Emperor, which is basically like the head deity in Chinese culture. Kinda like being visited by Archangel Michael or Saint Mary in the West. Anyway, he imparted to Zhang personal instruction on the principles of the Tao, or the way of the universe, that the bird and the snake innately knew. Quote, the next day, Zhang sprang up from his sleep wide awake and inspired by a celestial visitor, immediately set about creating a new martial art form that relied upon internal power or Qi at its root. This art held as its foundation the truth that yielding overcomes aggression and softness overpowers hardness. In honor of his divine influences, Zhang called his art Taichi Chun, the Grand Supreme Fist. For this, Zhang Sanfeng is known as the progenitor of the Wutang Ru schools, so named because they come from Wutang Shan, the mountain. And it worked. Zhang became more and more famous as a Taoist master. Eventually, the Emperor Taichi came to him for help with military strategy. The Emperor knew how dope the Wutong Mountains were too, and he wasn't having it with all the bandit gangs out there that were looting and pillaging those sacred lands. Zhang easily helped take them out, creating the first Wutong clan ever by teaming up with Emperor Taichi. It was recorded among Zhang Sanfeng's other feats that when he needed to, he could go for days, even months without food. He was impervious to the cold, wearing only a light vest and hat in all weather. And he could travel 1,000 Chinese li per day. That's about 310 miles in one day. Most horses can't even do this. It was even said that while meditating, Zhang's cultivated energy was so strong that it would make his coat flap and would shake all the walls around him. I've only covered about 20% of all the miracles this guy performed, and there has to be uncountable badassery that we're not even aware of. Who was Zhang Sanfeng? He's like the Jesus of martial arts masters. Where is he now? And is he still out there overlooking the Wutong Mountains and quietly observing all manner of human tomfoolery? Well, I don't know, but there's a lot here to reflect on.
I've heard much about you. They say you're tough, so I think I'll find out just how tough you are. It's the last thing you'll do. We'll see!
Look, it's been painful for all of us over the last 10 plus years watching our martial arts masters getting their asses handed them by these MMA guys. There have been guys today like Showdown taking these Bullshido masters out. But most people don't really know about the origins of true martial arts or what's really behind them. And I'd say most of these martial arts masters out there now are frauds. Maybe a small minority are well-intentioned people who actually aren't looking for a real fight. After all, the original purpose of the Wutong martial arts wasn't necessarily to destroy an opponent or make their heart explode by touching a few acupoints. Most people encountering a true Taoist martial artist and trying to take a shot would be on the ground before they knew it and wouldn't really understand how they got there. And you know what? They probably wouldn't be hurt. Because the essence of the original Wutong martial arts was to get out of the cycle of karmic debt and cultivate the internal spiritually while cultivating the external martial arts skills. By all accounts, we're talking about secrets of secrets and things humans aren't even ready to admit are real. If all of this is true, using these supernormal things on humans probably isn't even allowed. After all, why would you use a nuke to blow up a mosquito? In this episode, I've covered the 3 major forms of Chinese martial arts, their origins, and their mysteries. Is it possible that these are all just legends and never really happened? Or is it more likely that the truth is out of this world? I'd put my money on the martial arts masters here. If you want to know more about martial arts and the painful lengths good people are going to today to try to preserve them for future generations, I'd recommend you watch a mini documentary called Legends Unfolding that follow the story of Youfu Li and all of his efforts to preserve them. He might be one of the last true martial arts masters left, at least in spirit. And don't worry, there are English subtitles if you don't speak Mandarin. I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at Learn Chinese Now on YouTube. They helped me research leads for this script. In addition to teaching Chinese language, they also do shows on Chinese culture, and they're really good. If you like this topic, Metaphysical also has a few amazing videos on immortals and Chinese culture, Chinese pyramids, and weird encounters that you don't want to miss. By the way, how are you liking the Metaphysical show? If you love what we're doing and you want a more meaningful way to support, please check out our website and think about pledging. We give back a bunch in return if you decide to support the show. If you like this type of content, get the tier where you get access to Rise.tv, which has a catalog of over 400 well-researched videos that took us a long time to make. We've also just added a tier that includes a metaphysical bag of coffee per month if you're living in the domestic United States. If you're more of a t-shirt person, definitely check out our shop and get yourself some merch that I designed. They're pretty fun. And with that, I hope you thought this show was out of this world.